Welcome back, Pontiac High School students. This is lesson 3-3. We're looking at the United States Senate this time. Let's start off by defining this Senate of ours. It is a part of the upper house of our legislature. We refer to them as the upper and the lower house, even though there's not a big difference between the two, small differences. But a seat in the Senate is more difficult to gain, which is part of why it's the upper house. It's harder to be a senator than it is to be a representative, and it does have slightly more responsibility in some areas. For these reasons, the Senate is considered to be the upper house, and the House of Representatives is considered to be the lower house. But again, it is only slightly more responsibility than you would find in the House of Representatives. Now, the Senate itself has changed over time, perhaps a little bit more than the House of Representatives has in some ways. The size and organization has changed. It's always been a vital part of our government. It was one of those things that was created in that great compromise during the Constitutional Convention and has always been key to our American government. Now, the size itself changes whenever a state is added to the Union. You have to be a state to have representation in the U.S. Senate. And every time we get a new state, we add senators for that state. Now, every single state in our union has exactly 2 senators. It does not matter how big your population is. So, big California has 2 senators. Teeny tiny, again, population-wise, Wyoming has 2 senators. It doesn't matter. Right now, we have 50 states in our union, which means that we have 100 senators. If or when Puerto Rico becomes the 51st state, we would have 102 senators. So it's not fixed at that 100 number, unlike the House of Representatives, which is now fixed at 435. Now, when it comes to elections, originally, senators were chosen by state legislatures. So the state legislature, so the Michigan legislature, the people who represent your community within the state of Michigan, would choose that senator. And then the senator would go and represent the state in Washington, D.C. But this system didn't work out very well. Senators used to actually buy their seat from the states. You'd have a lot of bribery and a lot of corruption problems with this. They would bribe a few key members of state legislatures to make sure that their vote went in their way, and then they'd get to go sit on the U.S. Senate. This takes away the choice from the people themselves. So in the 17th Amendment, we changed this system. And after the 17th Amendment was passed, it's now a popular election. So every resident of a state, 18 or older, gets to vote in election of their senators. This is the same method that's used for the House of Representatives. Now, the term of a senator is different, however. Senators are elected to a 6-year term. Remember, members of the House are only elected to a 2-year term. So senators have a term that is 3 times longer than representatives in the House, which means that they're more able to act independently of public opinion. A senator who is elected by a state that feels very strongly one way on an issue might change their opinion, and they know that they're safe, they can stay in government for that 6-year term, and therefore they don't always have to respond to the will and the change of opinions of the American populace in the way that a representative does. They don't have to worry as much about their voters being happy. Now, another thing about the Senate, which is different than the House of Representatives, is that they're a continuous body. See, in the House of Representatives, every member has to win re-election in each congressional election. So all 435 are up for re-election every 2 years. But in the Senate, this is not the case. Only 1/3 of the members have to run for re-election in each congressional election. So in this last election, there were no senators in Michigan who were up for re-election because only 1/3 are running. That means every 2 years, you will either have one senator, and then 2 years later, you'll have a different senator, and then 2 years after that, no senators from your state are up for re-election. Now, after each election, 2/3 are, that means with each election, 2/3 of senators are guaranteed to keep their job. If we were to look at, again, this is the 112th Congress, so this is a little bit older, you might be able to see how this spreads out. And we have some states that are, consistently, regularly voting for Republicans are these solid red states. And then states that consistently, regularly vote for Democrats are our blue states. But you can have states like the ones in purple that sometimes veer toward Republican candidates and sometimes veer toward Democratic candidates that can split their vote and actually have one Republican and one Democrat in the U.S. Senate. Again, I should say this is fairly outdated. A number of these states now have 2 from the Republican Party or 2 from the Democrat, and some of them have flipped. But this is one example of how this lays out. You can also have independents. Bernie Sanders is still up here. He's an independent. This was Joe Lieberman. He's no longer there. All right. So continuous body. So let's look at the constituents. The senators have a larger constituency than members of the House. Constituency are those people who get to vote in their election. See, whereas representatives are elected just by the residents of their district, and a state can have several districts, like Michigan has 14 districts. Senators are elected by every resident of the state. So it's not like you have 2 senators and one represents the northern part of the state and one represents the southern part of the state. No. They both represent the entire state and have to be elected by the entire state. That is their constituency. When we look next at the qualifications to be a senator, what does it take to be a senator? There are official qualifications. A senator must be at least 30 years old, so they have to be older to be in the Senate than in the House of Representatives. House of Representatives was 25, Senate is 30. They have to be a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years. The House was 7, Senate is 9. And once again, they have to be a resident of the state in which they are representing. As with the House, there are those informal qualifications. They have to be known, they have to share the politics of their state, et cetera, et cetera. But that is the U.S. Senate and the members of the U.S. Senate. Thank you for joining me today, and farewell.